Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wall Street from Main Street podcast. My name is Mo Daoud, and today's guest is a returning guest, Bob Wenzel. He is the editor and founder of economicpolicyjournal.com. Bob, thank you for joining us again.
Sure, my pleasure.
Bob, I want to start off this podcast by looking at a trend that occurred in 2013. And one of the trends I noticed that started worldwide is demand for a higher wage, especially higher minimum wage in this country. In Maryland, they're proposing to increase minimum wage to $10 an hour, and then in D.C., they're proposing $11 an hour, and then I heard a week ago that the city of Seattle is proposing $15 per hour. The councilwoman that spoke in Seattle kind of blames everything on capitalism for all the inflation that's going on in the economy when it's the government mandatory inflation policy and endless money printing. So I want to ask you, how do you think this is going to end for consumer and people that are seeking a job?
Well, unfortunately, it's probably going to end badly because some of these minimum wage proposals are likely to pass. And basic fundamental supply and demand economics, nothing really complex. When you raise the price of anything, including the price of wages, there's less demand for it. So as you increase the minimum wage, what that means is that there will be less opportunity for those who are the least productive, which generally tend to be the young because they don't have the experience. So you're going to find a lot more unemployment amongst the youth. Either businesses will cause other employees to do twice as much work if they can, or what's happening in a lot of cases is businesses are looking at automation. Now, automation can be good. Capital improvements have a lot to do with the standard of living we have right now. However, some of that is occurring because of minimum wage laws and the fact that it will be less costly for businesses to hire people at the higher wages than to just buy the capital equipment that can do the job. At my website, economicpolicyjournal.com, today I have a post that shows where there's a video of a grape sorting machine. These are physical grapes that came off of different vines and are put in the machine, and the machine sorts the good grapes from the bad grapes, and it doesn't require any humans at all. So as they push this minimum wage up, you're going to see more of that, more people unemployed, more people pushed out by automation, and it's a terrible thing. But what you've got is a general population that doesn't understand some basic supply and demand economics, and they think just by law increasing the minimum wage, therefore everybody's wage is going to go up, without realizing that what it does is it puts people out of work. In the old days, you used to go to diners in places like the Denny's, and they would have a host there that would seat you. In these sort of lower level type restaurants, you don't see those hosts as much. There's a Denny's here in San Francisco where I am now, and it's just the waiters that when they have a free moment come along. Well, I'm sure if the minimum wage was lower and Denny's could hire someone at a lower price, they just put someone to handle those hosting duties. But we have a lot of situations where people don't realize it. There's no one doing a job that used to occur. We have automated gas stations now where, regardless of the weather, whether on the East Coast it's cold and freezing or on the West Coast some kind of rainstorm or something like that, people have to go out in their suits and their good clothes to pump gas. In the old days, there were attendants that would do that. They've just been priced out of the market by the minimum wages. So I just think the minimum wage is a terrible thing. It's causing severe unemployment now, and it will just make things worse down the road.
And the idea of raising minimum wage, it sounds good on paper, but when you implement it in reality, it does more harm than good, which, what we call the unintended consequences. And the University of George Mason here in Northern Virginia put out a paper a couple weeks ago, and they said in a research paper that raising the minimum wage actually does more harm than good because, for one, it raises consumer costs. Two, it prevents lower quality people that's trying to get their foot in the door, to prevent them from getting a job as well. So when people don't think about these things. They're very emotional regarding the minimum wage, and because a lot of sympathy around this issue.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, again, it's a situation where the population just doesn't understand basic economics, and the proponents of the higher minimum wages, which tend to be instigated by the unions, come up with catchphrases like "living wage." Well, what is that they want a living wage for people that are working? But what do they think the people that are working now at current wages are dead? I mean, it's ridiculous. A lot of the minimum wage people are part-timers that are going to school and doing other things, and others who again just have low productivity may have 2 or 3 jobs. There's a guy down the street here at an office supply store where I work at. He works there. He works at a 7-Eleven, and he was telling me he has a 3rd job. I mean, people tend to do what they have to do to make ends meet, and it's absurd to call it that people need what's called a living wage, which is really an unemployment wage, because it will cause people to become unemployed. It's distorting the facts. So it gets emotional in that sense, because what they do is by framing it as a living wage, they attack those who are against it by saying, "Oh, well, you're not in favor of a living wage." It's like, hey, let's step back a minute. First of all, no one's dying because of the wage. Secondly, what you've got is people that, if they have to, they're working more than one job. Just like my grandparents and everybody's immigrants when they first came to the United States, they worked hard. That's how you advance in this country, or the way you used to be able to advance in this country. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's the way people are able to grow and do things for their family and do things for the children and the grandchildren. It's absurd to say that anyone that is against the minimum wage is against the living wage. It's a deceiving attack on people who understand, again, basic economics and supply and demand, and the fact that when you increase the wage by law, what you're doing is pushing people out that can't afford to be hired at the higher wage. The hostesses from Denny's are gone. The gas station attendants are gone now. Who's next?
People that make burgers. I heard there's automation to make burgers now. I read an article about that the other day.
Yeah. I ran a story on that a couple of days ago. And again, it's the same thing. What you're seeing is businesses looking to automation, considering what the capital investment will be for the equipment, versus hiring people that, A, you have to pay them a higher wage, you have to pay them different benefits and everything else, and it's becoming much more and more advantageous for businesses to do a lot of things that are automated, and these low producing people are just out of work. It makes things tremendously worse for them. Also, George Reisman points out that when you put up the minimum wage, someone who may be working at a more difficult job, say doesn't work at McDonald's because $10 or $9 or whatever the going rate is at McDonald's, or $7, can't work for that amount. So he has to work at a job that might be a much more difficult job to earn $15. But if the government makes the minimum wage $15, and McDonald's has to pay that, then you got that guy who is capable of earning more money on another job, willing to take a McDonald's job and pushing the less trained further out from a job. So it's a terrible, terrible situation. And again, most of the people, the general population, don't understand it. And then you have very clever people, marketing people who are spreading propaganda, largely, again, influenced by unions, which like high minimum wages because it prevents people earning less than the minimum wage from competing against the union workers. So that's what you have there.
And it's all people that are fear that this country might end up like China or Indonesia, where the people there are getting paid less, a couple dollars an hour, and they're afraid that if that happened here, then people won't be able to make a living and provide for their family and etc. But if we had a free market, first of all, the company would not give their employees a lower wage, because that means that they won't be able to buy food or get shelter, take care of themselves, and be in good health, and etc. And then that's going to hurt the productivity of the company. So it doesn't make sense for them to offer lower wages anyway.
Yeah, well, what you have to understand, again, the United States is a very rich, a very wealthy country. So because of that, a person, there's tremendous demand for labor across the country, and for all kinds of labor. And because we have so much built-up capital, we can pay people a lot more. I really doubt if you completely eliminated the minimum wage that you'd find anybody in the United States just earning $2 an hour. I mean, that's the kind of thing that happens where there's not a capital base, and there are not a lot of businesses competing for that labor. Here in the United States, we have all kinds of businesses with all kinds of capital, all kinds of money, and they would certainly be bidding for the people. But again, if someone if it's a youth, especially if it's a youth that is poorly trained, poorly schooled in our public schools, they're not worth a lot, but they're probably worth $5-6. I would imagine easily here in the United States for a gas pumping job, and so those kids don't get the opportunity to get that first job, to get their foot in the door, to see how businesses work, to see what kind of rules the boss sets, to compare his job against his friend's job and what the bosses are like and what the work is like. None of that is happening. Instead, the kids are wandering the street, mugging people, playing knockout games. It's crazy.
And one of the other unintended consequences of higher minimum wage is that accelerate automation and technology. You just mentioned that there's no more gas attendants. Well, they replaced the gas attendants with the credit card machines at the gas pump now. So all you need is to swipe your credit card and pump your gas. So you don't need a gas attendant anymore. And then also we're seeing in the manufacturing industry more automation and robotics that are replacing the manufacturer workers. I know in China, Foxconn, which is one of the biggest manufacturing companies in the world, are planning to implement automation and robotics within the next few years and to replace the workers in result of inflation and the demand for higher wages. So I wanted to ask you, how do you think, what kind of effect would that have in the labor market once automation becomes a bigger and bigger role in the economy?
Well, you have to understand, automation itself is not bad. Increasing capital goods generally overall is a good thing, because what it means is a businessman has decided, hey, if I bring in some capital and create machines, I can produce more. That's the only reason, or produce better given the circumstances. So the fact that the United States is as rich as it is because there's been a lot of capital investment and a lot of creation of automated type equipment and different types of capital. So that alone, there's a supply and demand for everything. Just because people are laid off in one sector doesn't mean they will be unemployable anywhere. When the car finally took over in the United States, buggy drivers, demand for them dropped tremendously. You get a few at Central Park, but even the new mayor de Blasio wants to shut them down. But the point is that those people found other work in other places. It's basic supply and demand. Humans are the most malleable type of production piece that you have. A specific capital. If you've got something that mows lawns and and you have a lawn mowing business, you can't turn that into a painting machine. Okay, but you can certainly put a laborer behind a lawnmower machine, and you can certainly have that same laborer paid. So there's a lot of malleability and a lot of flexibility with labor. It's the most flexible of commodities. So basically what you have is a situation where if automation comes in one place and those people no longer have opportunities there, they'll have opportunities in other sectors. It's just, again, just basic supply and demand. If there was an oversupply and overabundance of labor, which is really hard to conceive of, the price of labor would go down to zero, and that's not going to happen. Okay, there would be no demand for zero, and that doesn't happen. What you have in periods of high unemployment are two things. It's very, very deceiving there, also with regard to how the public views it. First of all, what you may have is which mainstream economists call frictional, although that's dangerous to call it that because it leads to other thoughts about a mechanistic economy. But what happens is if there's a boom-bust cycle, during the bust, all that's happening is people are moving from one sector, which is no longer profitable for businesses to operate in, to another sector. It's basic, again, supply and demand economics. If that didn't happen, businesses wouldn't be paying people $5, $7, $10 or whatever they're paying them if there was just an overabundance of labor. Now, what happens at a point, especially in the business cycle, is the government starts making unemployment payments to those people who have lost their job, so they have less incentive to look for jobs. At the same time, which you tend to have, not in all boom busts, depending upon what the central bank is doing, but there's a tendency for prices to deflate a little bit, and so consequently the minimum wage becomes more severe because businesses are looking for deals and discounts and things like that. And if the market would just be allowed to adjust without these minimum wages, people would work for that. But if there's a general deflation, what they're buying would cost less. So it gets complex, and what people just sort of look at and say, wow, all these people are out of work. There's an overabundance of labor. But look at why. You have to ask that person, well, if that's the case, why are businesses paying any regular laborer any price at all if there's an overabundance? They would pay them all the minimum wage or below the minimum wage. So, what you really have is a situation where, getting back to your automation, there's always opportunities for labor, and what automation does generally, an increase in the capital structure of the economy, what that does is improve the standard of living for everyone, because generally what machines do is allow for greater production. That's the only reason a businessman would allow to do that. And when a minimum wage is increased, what's actually occurring is a laborer, which might make more sense at a lower price, is priced out of the market, because at some point it does make sense to bring in labor, bring in capital to replace those laborers.
And then also, if we're going to bring down the wages and not have minimum wage at all, then we also can't have the government controlling the money supply and the price of goods and services that are offered in the economy as well. Because right now, if we have free market and the price system, all the wages and prices will come down. But if we just have wages come down and the prices still going up, then the economy is going to be in big trouble.
Yeah, well, what you have is a situation, again, it's the central banks here in the United States, it's the Federal Reserve in the boom-bust cycle. So what the Federal Reserve does is they print money that tends to go to not all of Wall Street, but the Wall Street fat cats, those that are tied in with government. It goes there first, so they have more money. So they're able to, with the new money, bid away goods and services and labor and capital away from other people. So what you have is a situation where the market is functioning after the central bank is printing its money, and the money is ending up in these fat cats' hands, and they're spending it on their stuff, and there's less money available for everybody else. So So you got to point the finger right there at the central bank for that going on.
And that's a good point. And the trend for higher minimum wage is something that people should keep an eye on for the year 2014 as we go forward. Now I want to shift gears here and talk about the economy in general. Now with poverty at 50 million and climbing, the real unemployment is around 22% if you look at chatelstat.com. And inflation is trending higher in this country and around the world as well. Do you agree that the economy is stuck in a stagflation for within the next few years?
Well, actually, I'm not sure we're completely in the stagflation yet. I think that might happen down the road. Right now, what I see is a situation where we're coming out of the recession, and we're coming out of it, unfortunately, not because the market adjusts to the post-recession economy, but again, the Federal Reserve is printing money at dramatic rates. It's near 10% right now, which is very, very, very heavy, and that's boosting with the stock market and the economy. And you're seeing other sectors of the economy benefit from that now. And I tend to believe that the Bureau of Labor Statistics is not fudging the price inflation numbers too much at this point. It's probably around 2%. There's something called the MIT Billion Prices Index, which is the index of a billion prices over the internet that they measure, and that's going along at 2%. Now, part of that is because after the 2008 crisis and the recession, what it did is it scared a lot of people about the economy, and you had what Hayek called a secondary deflation. And what happens at that point is not only banks and businesses sort of pull back and not spend as much money, but but individuals also do. So there's a great demand for cash balances, and that's sort of what's been keeping the lid on inflation. That plus there's been increases in productivity in the energy sector, and of course the high-tech sector is just simply amazing with productivity increases. But as the Fed continues to print money and the economy sort of turns around and people see the stock market booming and real estate and all that sort of thing, there's going to be less demand to hold cash balances. And then at that point, you're going to see the inflation really kick in. I think it's going to come very, very quickly when it finally does. And the Federal Reserve, like normal, will be behind the story and probably won't start slowing down inflation, their monetary pumping, until the money supply or the inflation rate is at 5% or higher. So what you're going to have is a slowdown, but it won't be great enough. They won't push interest rates high enough, and consequently what's going to happen is that's when the stagflation will kick in. You'll have prices increasing. You'll have a slowdown in the economy, the stock market, real estate, because of the measures the Fed is doing to slow money supply, but it won't be enough to really clamp down on the inflation that's happening, especially because the desire to hold cash balances will shrink, and your price inflation will really take off at that point, and the stagflation will kick off then, which could be very reminiscent of what happened in the late 70s, early 80s.
Now, one of the biggest surprises in 2013 is that the Federal Reserve actually tapered their QE. Not much if you compare it to their balance sheet. It's only $10 billion, $5 billion in Treasury and $5 billion in mortgage-backed security. Why do you think they decided to do it? Are they trying to manage the market by slowing it down a little bit?
Yeah, so the first thing you have to do is you have to look at the money supply and what's actually going on. Money supply, again, is growing in near 10%, and has very little to do with QE3 that the Federal Reserve has been operating. Up until recently, the last few weeks, almost all the money that has gone into QE3 has gone into what's known as excess reserves. And what that means is the banks get the money and they put it right back at the Federal Reserve, and it doesn't enter the system, and it's not bidding up goods and services. Now, there's other money that seems to be coming into the economy, and that appears to be a case where some funds are being switched from demand deposits in areas where there is great or larger reserve requirements, and it's being moved to sectors where there's little or no reserve requirements. So the banks are loaning money out on that. Now, the tapering is really only impacting what's going on at the excess reserve level. So that's not even money that's entering the surface system. And I view it as a kind of a smokescreen as to the money printing that the Fed is really doing because of the other parts of the money creation machine they have. And so, again, that's part of what I mean by the Fed is going to be too slow, too late. Bernanke has instituted a number of different policies, what he calls tools to print money, and they're complex. They really make no sense. They're extremely dangerous because you don't know when they're going to reverse on him. For example, the excess reserves now total $2.3 trillion. Before Bernanke started to pay interest on them, they were rarely, and this is a number I watch weekly, rarely above $100 billion. I can't remember a time where they were. So he has suddenly, by some of the quirky tools, the QEs and the paying interest and other things, created a very unstable system for the Federal Reserve to operate. And it's not clear whether Janet Yellen will be able to handle this or her new sidekick, Stanley Fischer, which has just been named co-chairman at the Fed. So don't pay too much attention to the taper. It wasn't a lot. I think it's mostly for show. It is has very little to do with what is actually going on at the Federal Reserve. What you have to do for that is you have to look at the actual money supply numbers, the M2 number, and that number is growing at a tremendous rate, and that explains the increase in the stock market and the in real estate. The Fed is just pumping the money out there.
I agree with you there. Now, before I let you go, I want to talk about Obamacare. Now, I saw an article on Mises.org and on your website as well, and there are two provisions in Obamacare I don't think people know about. One of them is the reinsurance program, in which large claims are capped for insurers offering individual plans under Obamacare. So insurers pay for claims up to $45,000, while the federal government picked up 80% of the cost exceeding $45,000 and up to a maximum $250,000. Another program in the Obamacare, another provision is the risk corridor program that limits total losses for insurance companies via a complex formula. So the taxpayers would be on the hook for 75 to 80% of the insurance company's losses. So basically, if this doesn't work out for the health insurance, the taxpayers are on the hook. And this is a massive wealth redistribution plan. It's nothing different than bailing out the big bank back in 2008. So I wanted to ask you, how long do you think Obamacare would last in this country, and do you think it's going to get repealed?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. That article was by Joe Salerno, and it's very correct. I mean, you have to understand, this Obamacare bill is over 2,000 pages. No one has read the damn thing in its entirety. There are paragraphs put in there by specific special interests that benefit them and no one else. And that's why, you can now, people are starting to take a look at different parts of the health bill and say, hey, look at this, insurers will be bailed out here, and these insurers will be bailed out there. So basically what you have to understand is Obamacare is really a crony insurance deal. That's what it's all about. They've got all kinds of hidden things in there that will protect them against massive losses and improper insuring of people. So that's extremely dangerous. I mean, let's hope it gets repealed. I think there's a lot of people that don't like it, and there will be more so because throughout the year, more and more people are going to end up off of their business health programs and find out how expensive it is with the requirements for this insurance that are now part of Obamacare. So there will be uproar. And one positive signal from a strategic point of view is the Republicans just passed or agreed to this latest spending bill. And I think a lot of that has to do is they want to completely focus the country on Obamacare. They know it's a mess. They know it's dangerous. They know a lot of people are going to be upset when they start getting these health insurance bills. and there's a shot that may get repealed. My fear is that what will happen is that it won't be repealed in its entirety, and that what will happen is the Republicans will get in and create their own sort of Obamacare, which will be just as bad, just a different set of cronies. So once government gets involved in something, it's really hard to pull them out of it, and that's a danger. But right now, Obamacare is a major mess, and it won't get any better. And the worst thing that could happen is if it just moves along, because then what you're going to have is you're going to over time. I'm convinced the living I'm lost for my words here. The of Americans will fall, because what you're going to have is you're going to have poor treatment. You will have, despite denials, you will have death panels, so people will be killed off. And what will also happen is research will start to decline. We've had tremendous growth in research in the medical system that has helped lots of people and been responsible for life expectancy growth throughout the world. So the worst thing that could happen is you're going to get Obamacare, just like it is, which is going to make things bad. They're taking out the price system, so there's going to be no supply demand adjustments on prices, so there'll be long lines and waiting lists. What this will then mean is that some people will just go to the private doctors, and there's going to be a shortage of doctors. So eventually what I would expect, and again, this is if Obamacare continues, what I would expect is that the government will rule that all doctors have to take all patients based on whatever the illness is, and not determine who can pay for it and who cannot. They'll have to take Obamacare patients. They'll have to take various insurance policies that they weren't taking before. That's going to be a mess. It's going to discourage people from coming to the United States to practice medical care. Doctors from here will start moving to the Caribbean and Mexico and conducting their practices from there. Then you're going to see a lot of that, and then you're going to have what's known as medical vacations, where people travel outside the country to get their health taken care of, and then there will be laws against that. And so consequently, I mean, it's just going to be a major mess, major backups in the system, more and more regulations that will not benefit the consumer, and an eventual decline in life expectancy.
And also, with the higher premium that people are going to have to pay, it's going to really hurt discretionary spending in this economy. So I think that's why the holiday spending did not go very well. Even when they started the holiday shopping season a week earlier, a week before Thanksgiving, that didn't even help. So that's the sign of things to come in the consumer discretionary economy will continue to go on a decline because people need to save their money to pay a higher premium.
Yeah, Obamacare, because it's been in the news the way it is, has a lot of people spooked. They don't know what it's going to cost them, and some people are actually getting their bills, and people I've run into are paying two, 3 times what they were paying for premiums before the Obamacare regs kicked in. So you're getting a lot of those horror stories. There'll be more this year, and consequently, so what happens there is that builds on the thing I talked about earlier, the increased demand to hold cash balances, which sort of just causes a downward pressure on prices across the board. But that will change as the stock market continues up, real estate continues up, and once inflation starts to kick up a little bit and people realize their prices are going up, then that demand to hold cash balances and the increase in that is going to completely reverse, and what you're going to see is people wanting to spend more because they think prices will be higher down the road. So the inflation could kick around very, very quickly. So that sort of all ties in, and it's just from Obamacare to the Federal Reserve to minimum wages. It's just the government messing with the economy, messing with the system, making it much more dangerous, much more unstable, and making it a much more poor economy for all of us.
Yeah, I agree there. It's going to be an interesting time for the next few years. Well, Bob, thank you for joining us on our Wall Street from Main Street podcast. If people want to find out more about your work and your article, where can they go?
The best place to go is to my blog site where I blog 7 days a week. It's called economicpolicyjournal.com. You'll see stories there all day long, new stories.
Okay, great. And I highly recommend people check out his website. A lot of great information there. All right, Bob, thank you for joining us.
Okay, great. Thanks. Good talking to you, Mo. Take care.